So I watched the Democrat debate the other night, so you wouldn't have to, and I did a live stream on it, which I'll put a link if you want to see my lengthy 2-hour diatribe on it. But I wanted to do a video on something specific that I see in it, and that's the idea of a lot of the policies that these Democratic candidates are advocating for are kind of fantasies. They're pie in the sky, and they don't deal with the pragmatism of the real world. Now, I know anyone who's astute in politics knows both sides do this. It's constantly you have politicians promising things that they know they won't be able to deliver on. And it's something that I myself am guilty of. I'm idealistic. I'm like, oh, if I'd win in Congress, I'd want X, Y, and Z. But it's not that simple. You can't just push whatever, even if you're president, you can't just push whatever policy you want. And in fact, you see some of the Democrats threat, I'd declare a state of emergency on climate change and do X, Y, and Z. I'd, with the stroke of my pen without Congress, eliminate student debt. That stuff's dangerous and not constitutional anyway. So you have to be pragmatic and discuss how you would get your plans through. And so you can handle that that's what politicians do, but it seems especially egregious when you're talking about massive government increases taking over so many areas such as the energy sector, the economy, the healthcare sector, etc. And you're not willing to talk about how you'll pay for the plans or the roadblocks that those plans will meet. And the other thing that's especially frustrating with these Democratic candidates is they speak just like most of the Democratic Party in terms of morality all the time. So it's not just, hey, I have a disagreement with Trump or with the Republicans. It's they're immoral or they're terrible people for what they're doing. And I think when you look at that, it shows that they're not prepared or they're being disingenuous when they're ignoring real stumbling blocks that happen in the real world. So this particularly was true of me in the trade deal negotiations and how what the Democrats were saying. So all of them condemned Trump's tariffs and said it was hurting farmers in Iowa and things like that. Now, that could be true. The truth is, when you're talking about these difficult policy decisions, things like tariffs or sanctions or launching military attacks on people, there are pros and cons to all of this. I'm opinionated. I tell you what I think the right way to go is, but I understand that even the plans that I want or the situations that I want still have cons to them. That's just the way things work. So it's easy to just say, we'll have a world without tariffs. But then at the same time, almost all the Democrats are simultaneously saying we've had disastrous trade deals and it allowed the countries like China to be able to pay the companies to send their employment to China where they could pay people a non-living wage, and that devastates the U.S. worker. These two statements on the behalf of the Democrats are contradictory because they're living in a fantasy world. So let's go with what the Democrats say. The first thing when talking about trade that's glaring is they seem to care less about the actual workers and more about climate change, which is the big boogeyman they're going to use to scare you out of all of your freedoms and money. That's the next big thing. Just like they used to lie and say, oh, it's Vietnam, or oh, it's the, insert evil people. Now it's, oh, insert the evil climate change. And that's going to be a far more effective mechanism to get you to willfully give away all of your rights and money to the government and lead to massive government expansion, which will be a disaster. But they say, oh, we need a trade deal that has to do with climate change and is fair to climate change and that'll help the U.S. worker. Okay, let's assume then that Bernie or Steyer or Klobuchar, whoever, gets their deal passed. What would they do then when China says, okay, we signed this trade deal saying that we won't subsidize our stuff anymore, but we're going to continue to have subsidies, and we're going to continue to tariff American goods, and we're going to continue to environmentally pollute? What will be the enforcement mechanism that's used then? They say it won't be tariffs. Tariffs are immoral. Tariffs are terrible. They hurt the U.S. worker. Okay, so no tariffs. Are they suggesting militaristic strikes? Apparently not. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say no. So what exactly are they going to do to ensure that China complies to the trade deals? Because that's the situation, according to even these Democrats, that we find ourselves in currently. Other countries, such as China, have taken advantage of the deals we've had, and it's led to the mistreatment of the U.S. worker. So what did they suggest Trump do? They say we need new trade deals. Okay, negotiate new trade deals. But with any negotiation, you need to have some sort of threat behind it. It's the exact same way when you look at the Iran situation. Reasonable people could disagree on whether or not they think the Soleimani strike was a good thing. But we should all agree there has to be some sort of deterrence if our embassy's attacked, regardless if you think we should be in the area or not. Once that attack occurs, we need to have some sort of response. If we go the way of Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie and these people, where they say not only is responding bad, but even suggesting we'll respond. Oh, that put Iran on edge, and then they shot down an airliner. That's Trump's fault that airliner got shot down. This suggestion of we can't even have the potential of deterrence, we can't even talk about deterrence, we assure the rest of the world, no, we'll never strike you back. that means we'll be taken advantage of even more because everyone knows, okay, but there's no threat here. We could push and push and there'll never be any pushback. It's the same with trade policy. If you're unwilling to say, yes, there would ever be a time where if someone violates trade policy and hurts the U.S. worker, we would have some sort of tariffs against them, then those countries are going to continue to abuse the American worker. Now, I will give the benefit of the doubt two things. One, these debate formats suck. So maybe if you gave these people more time, they would be able to elaborate exactly why Trump's tariffs are bad, but they would still be willing to have tariffs as an option at some point. And second, I do have to give props to at least Amy Klobuchar, who came out and she actually did talk about how in the healthcare situation, Bernie and Elizabeth's plan, these Medicare for All plans, are sort of a fantasy. She says, look, pragmatically, you have to tell us how you'll pay for these things. If you don't, then it's just a fantasy. And she also talks about how there's opposition in the Democratic Party for these plans. For example, there are plenty of Democratic governors that are opposed to the idea of eliminating private insurance because it would kick millions of Americans off of insurance that they like right now. So how would Bernie and Elizabeth overcome these stumbling blocks in their own party? And they don't want to talk about that. They just say, oh, it's a question of morality. You have to be for Medicare for all or else you're a bad person. You remember Warren said in the first debate, if you don't feel that way, you shouldn't even be on the stage. So it's just all the more aggravating. I understand politicians on all sides promise things they aren't going to keep, but it's all the more aggravating when you have these candidates that are pushing for massive government increases. Some of the biggest we've ever seen. I mean, look at the Green New Deal that almost all of them support. It suggested things like retrofitting every building in the United States for renewable energy. In my small rural town alone, that would cost millions of dollars. They can't even keep buildings from being dilapidated in cities such as Detroit. But now we're going to retrofit every building within 10 years for renewables. We're going to stop using fossil fuels within 10 years. All of our cars will be totally renewables. Airplanes, which we don't even have one that uses renewables, will somehow magically be renewable. And that's just one small part of this. It's a fantasy. It's not going to happen. And so it's especially egregious when they're couching it, not only these huge plans, but couching it in morality. You're immoral. You're all going to die if you don't believe with this plan that's not even remotely feasible. We see that with the energy policy. We see that with environmental policy. We see it with the healthcare policy, and we see it with trade policy. So, hey, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. I want to give a shout out to a good friend of mine. I don't know, I got to ask him if he allows me to use his name, but he hooked me up with this new mic stand with my microphone and things like that, so hopefully the audio quality is going better. I also want to give a shout out to Milo and Dib, two of my Patreons. They're really helping me out, get some new programs, some new tech to make my videos better, so thank you so much to them. If you'd like to support me on PayPal or Patreon, I'll have a link into the description where you can do that. If you don't have money to give or you just don't feel like it, no problem whatsoever. You might consider supporting me by liking, subscribing, recommending my channel to other people. And I also have a link where in the description where you can follow me on BitChute, and you can also follow me on Twitter. So I'll be doing a live stream tomorrow, Friday the 17th at noon. And I'll probably be putting more material out today unless my wife makes me clean the house or something. So thanks so much, everyone, and have a good one.